So, hi, we're on record. Paul Cohen here doing my Zoom in Touch wisdom talks. And I've called on a good friend of mine, Sandra Palmer, from Auckland, or Waipu now, or part Auckland.
But both, yeah.
Both. We first met during doing the last of the 500 hours of our yoga teacher training at the Contemporary Yoga School in Auckland. And we've done a bit of iRest training together, and we keep connecting now and again. Sandra is a psychologist as one of her main professions, and incorporates lots of styles of yoga and movement and breath to support her understanding and appreciation of psychology. That's probably quite a good little intro. Do you want to add to it?
I mean, I was a psychologist first, so I think I graduated in like 1992, and for many years was quite happy working with the status quo. And then I did get to a stage where I was doing breath and yoga nidra with clients because I felt like it was such a useful resource for me. And then I was really concerned that the psychology board would strike me off if they knew what I was doing behind closed doors. And so I took some time off and had babies, as you do. And when I came back, I thought, right, I want to be really transparent in how I want to work with people. And I want to work holistically. I want to work with all parts of the person, not just the neck up, which is what psychology tends to do or has tended to do in the past. And so that's when I went off and did my 200-hour yoga teacher training, and then did the 300 hours. So I met Paul, and I guess I've just kept delving into that space, and that there's a, yoga and psychology aren't that different. No. They aren't that different, and they both are working towards, well-being for somebody, and just using different words sometimes to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I was really interested in getting you on one of these talks is around mental health, and particularly with the lockdown and having some appreciation, understanding of people's mental capacities or abilities or challenges, whatever they might be. And so we're now the 26th of June, and in New Zealand we're out of lockdown, but we're still sort of hovering on the edge of what's going to happen next. We've got a few more COVID-19 people in New Zealand now come in. Do you want to talk about what you have experienced in terms of people's difficulties in dealing with stuff, and or talk about what you do and how that engages?
Well, I guess I avoid talking about mental health because, again, that compartmentalizes people, and I think that's only talking about this part. And so I kind of try and use the word well-being, because then it's not saying, well, you're a flawed person because you've got this mental health diagnosis or struggling with this mental health issue. It's, okay, so what can we do to support your well-being? And then we're working more holistically. And I've continued via Zoom to work with my regular clients, majority who have suffered some kind of trauma in their past, particularly sexual trauma, and it's ACC funded work. And we've continued running, we run trauma sensitive yoga groups and iRest groups under ACC as well. So coming into contact with maybe 50 women a week during COVID, during lockdown. And we started our groups right at the last 2 weeks, right when we went into level 4, because we kind of anticipated it might happen. And so it's been, people have had such varied experiences. There are some people who say, wow, the world has finally met me where I am. I don't want to leave my home, because leaving my home causes me, because of the issues that I've experienced in my past and my current health issues, whether that's chronic fatigue, chronic pain, PTSD, anxiety, depression, then the world has met me where I am, and there is no longer this pressure to go out. I can work from home, I can see people from home, I can do yoga at home, and there's just this contentment about, actually, the world is where I've always wanted it to be. And so you've got, on one hand, you've got people who are just really content, And I must admit, I was really content during lockdown as well, not rushing and being really busy. And then you've got, I guess, a whole lot of other people, and this is not just two groups of people, but kind of think about where people might sit in between as well. And another group of people, you think about what, I guess, the lockdown experience and this whole COVID-19 is just this real uncertainty. We have lost our control over our lives in a way, and being disempowered by being told what we have to do. And so for many people with a history of trauma, what is the kind of body experience of that? It's a loss of control, disempowerment, uncertainty, no predictability in the world. And so people who were doing like really, really well and were really stabilized and able to regulate themselves were then kind of often, it has been triggered by the sensations in the body of those similar feelings and have struggled. Mm-hmm. And yeah, really, really struggled. And then there's people who kind of sit in between, I think. And I guess, and we're still sitting with it. And there is no end point at which we're going to go, well, it doesn't seem very near anyway, the end point of actually, well, we know what's going to happen next and blah, blah, blah. And I think the way that Jacinda did it in terms of giving us some real predictability and control as much as she could was really, really useful for many of us, because it did take at least a little of that uncertainty away. It gave me a sense of knowing what was going to happen next. Mm. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think for some people, someone taking control made some people feel less easy in themselves as well. So we've had this kind of two sides of the same coin thing going on as well. So yeah. The people that responded well to lockdown, were they more introvert, or did that not happen?
I would say more introverted, definitely. And also maybe, and struggling in different ways. Maybe there's social anxiety around going out, or agoraphobia, or kind of those kind of issues that are going on in their lives. Or it's just really harder to get out because of physical accessibility.
Yes.
And so, but again, I don't think we can make a blanket thing of this is everybody in this group, because we're all just so different, and we all just, I'm quite an extroverty introverted, or introverted extroverted, I don't know. But I loved the quietness, and I think there's a lot of people who responded to that permission to slow down.
Yes.
Permission to do very little. Yes. Without guilt, and just to rest and to make sourdough bread, or to spend hours at the supermarket without feeling pressured that you had to return to work. So I think for a lot of people there was a lot of contentment, time with family, not traveling to work, all that kind of stuff.
So I'd like to talk more about quite a few of the points that you brought up about trauma-sensitive yoga, language, that kind of stuff. But one thing that interests me is those people that were feeling comfortable in lockdown in New Zealand now, they're going back to work, and they're coming back into the kind of the real world. Are those, and I know everyone's different, but are those people now struggling because they've now got to go back, and they had this taste of something that was really comfortable for them?
I don't know of anybody who's had to return 100% yet.
Okay.
Like, it feels like New Zealand workplaces have now realised the benefits of allowing people to work from home. And so I think, I don't know anyone who's been forced to return to work 100% of the time without giving them some ability to work from home. So I think in a way, our New Zealand society has met a lot of the needs. And, we've kind of opened our eyes up to different ways of working, I think, which has been one of the silver linings of COVID.
Yeah. It's been quite amazing watching. I was doing a Zoom, I'm on a course with someone, and I think they had about 1,000 people on the course. It's like phenomenal.
Wow,
reaching 75 different countries. It's been quite phenomenal how we outreach in that way.
And with our trauma-sensitive yoga classes used to be run only in central Auckland, and we were only running face-to-face. And so, of course, you've got people who have to travel an hour or more each way, and it adds this layer of just additional stress
Yes.
Something which is already really stressful, to coming to a group of people and being in your body.
Yes.
And so we've got now being able to offer the Zoom classes. We've got people from all over New Zealand who can attend, and also people can choose to do it from the safety of their own home.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's I mean, we're having to do a pilot and prove it to ACC that it is safe and effective.
Yep.
But so far, everything is pointing that it is.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, my classes, I've been having people from Switzerland, Mexico, Malaysia, England. It's been so cool. Connecting with people around the world, and it really works. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel like plastic or distant, or it feels like I can really connect well with people. So trauma sensitive yoga, I know it's something that is really hot, or it has been for a while, hasn't it, in terms of language, and in terms of touch, probably the two main things. Do you want to just talk about that and your experience and understanding of those things?
Well, I guess the starting point is, as we talked about before, someone's experience of trauma is having the power and control taken away.
Yes.
And so I guess so everything that we do, and feeling unsafe. So I guess the premise that we're working from is, or create safety. That's our starting point. Create safety in the way that we welcome people to the class, in the way that the class is set up, in the way that we send emails to start with. So we're really creating that safety first and foremost. And part of the way that we, I guess, create safety and give power back to, and control back to people is by using really invitational language. Like, we are the complete opposite of a class which is saying, right, do this, align your leg here, lift the arch of your foot, place your toes in this particular way, which can be, alignment can be a really useful thing to teach. But for this particular group of people, or anyone who has a history of trauma, well, actually, I kind of actually think everyone deserves an opportunity to have a trauma-informed yoga experience rather than just as being told what to do. But that's just my personal opinion. And so everything that we offer in a class is invitational.
Yeah.
So we are inviting people to do something in their own time. They can choose to participate. They can choose not to. They can choose to have their videos on for Zoom. They can choose to have their videos off. They can choose to move in the way that we might be suggesting, or they may choose to do something really completely different. Yeah. And it's like everything, it's not just some of the things that we're offering are a suggestion or an invitation, it's like everything. And so the language is quite different, and it can sound kind of strange for somebody who is used to going, to being like, because a lot of yoga classes, big yoga, and it's like, do this, do that, do this, do that. And I'm great. I love a good yoga class like that. But this is quite a different, I guess, perspective on that. And it's been interesting in Zoom, because I wonder the freedom that gives you when people can turn the videos off and really do what they want without feeling like other people they're conscious of other people around them. Yeah. So there's a freedom that provides. And your touch, we just don't touch people because, well, I guess it's this whole thing. I don't feel like I've got the right to touch anybody else. And I guess the other thing is, like, in our trauma sensitive yoga classes or in a trauma informed yoga class, we're not trying to create a particular shape. No. We're not trying to, I always say to people, there's no Instagram moments in our classes, like, we're not creating this amazing looking shape. It's like, actually, what is it that you want to do in your body that may look really different from what I'm doing in my body and the person next to you might be doing in their body? So it's just this complete freedom. Yeah. And I love participating in classes like that, when I can it's like doing your own private practice, but being held in a safe space, I guess. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of controversy around touch, and I know what a really good, useful, intentional touch in a yoga class can be very useful, but in these particular classes, we don't touch people. Yeah, fair enough. And we, you know, and people can say, well, why don't you ask people if you can touch? And it's like, well, if you've come from experiences where no one has ever listened when you've said no, or you don't know how to say no, then how do you know that that person doesn't actually want you to touch them?
Yeah.
And what about if the person A says, yes, you can touch me, but how does that impact the person who's next to them?
Absolutely.
As you're walking around the class? So we just never, ever leave our, and when we're in a face-to-face situation, we just never leave our mat. And if we do, we say what's going to happen. So there is just this, so there's a safety and control and that they have, and what's going to happen in the rooms and predictability. Yeah.
Can you describe the language that you might use and how different it might be? Is that easy?
Yep. So we could be sitting here and I could say, you might want to find a comfortable seat. So you might like to feel your feet on the floor. And as you're ready, you might want to press one foot to the floor and then the other. So you could push one foot to the floor and then the other. That's one choice. Or another choice could be to press both feet together onto the floor. So one choice might be one foot and then the other. And the other choice is about pressing both feet into the floor. And you can continue doing this for as long as it's useful or interesting to you. Or you might choose to pause and just to notice what you might notice in your body, if there is anything to notice. Do you see quite prosthetic voice tone, keeping it, talk a lot? We talk continually, well, not almost continually. And I guess that is part of anchoring people into the room and providing lots of choices. Yeah.
Very different from saying, I want you now to do this.
Yeah.
That could trigger some historical relationship with someone of dominance, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, it's more to do with if somebody's never had choices, then they often don't, you don't realize you have choices.
Yeah.
And then this is like, actually, I have a choice in how I move my body. It's about just empowering someone. Actually, it's about empowerment. I have a choice in how I move my arm here.
Yes.
Wow. And actually, when think about the people, I mean, I grew up not in my body, right? I grew up in a way that was hypervigilantly and external focused. And so I know what it's like not to live in my body. And when you don't live in your body, it's really hard to say, well, what do I want? What do I like? What don't I like? There is a sense of not knowing because you don't know the sensations in the body or how it moves. And so I guess there's this, as we get to know, all we're trying to do is notice the body. And from noticing the body, we notice the sensations, and then we can make choices from that. That is all we're trying to do. It's not rocket science. It's really, really simple.
No. Just some people come along and they do really well, or does that also spark off some challenges for people because now they have a choice and never had to make a choice before? And could that not be?
Yeah, some people don't know, and that's okay. We really normalize it, and so there's a lot of we leave time to explore. And if you're unsure, you might do this, and then do this, and see which is most useful to you right now.
Yes.
It's about keeping in the present moment. And I guess it depends on what's doing well, because it can be very triggering. We're suggesting to people that they come into this place, whether you've got chronic pain, what happens with people with chronic pain? You just avoid the pain like you do with emotional pain. And they're coming to these classes to sit in their body and to be in the body. And it's scary and it's difficult and it's challenging. And for that reason, all of our participants have therapists. So people are not left unsupported.
Yeah.
And so you've got a top-down talking approach, working with a bottom-up body-based approach. And even in the Zoom classes, we have two of us there, and we have the second person. Someone's teaching and the other person has their number. And if someone wants to take time out and talk to the other person, then that's really normalized in the class. So it's just creating those support.
Oh yeah, that's cool. So people can do their yoga. They say, I've got an issue. I want to talk to so-and-so, and you have a Zoom chat together?
No, not a therapeutic chat, but it's like, actually I'm struggling right now, or I'm really triggered, or I'm dissociated, and can I just have a chat for a moment? And it's just about us just reminding them of what tools they already have, bringing them back into the present moment so they can then return to the group. Because we're really clear, like, we are not their therapists, and we're really, really clear on that. They have their own therapist, and in this particular, we are yoga teachers in this particular situation.
Yeah.
But
So
we are yoga teachers who work with trauma in our everyday life, so we know about trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, you understand all those.
It's frozen.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we do freeze every so often. Just the internet's a bit strange. We're okay. If it goes on, we can.
Yeah, I'm just going to make sure I'm just on my hotspot. There we go.
Yeah, cool. You're on your hotspot.
Yep.
So fascinating work, and I know it's becoming more and more. And particularly, there's been, oh man, the history that's been coming out of the yoga world in terms of the different abuse that's been quite shocking, really.
Yeah.
Quite an, on one aspect, there's been a terrible track record of all these gurus that have been abusing their power and position. So the idea really is to, and I've been reading some things about, the death of the guru. I think we're in an era now where we're not following someone, that we are being re-informed about how we can tap into our own resources and find our own internal wisdom rather than wanting someone else to do it for us, which is kind of the thing, I think, historically that's happened since, probably.
And, I guess yoga teaching was this one-on-one training with a guru. And so that's all you did get, I guess, that's all you could learn about was that person's perspective. And now it's like, well, I can do this 200-hour training, and then I'll leap onto this 200-hour training online. Yes. And then so we can actually be exposed to many, many, many different perspectives. And so I guess that creates less of a guru type situation in which we're less likely to just pay attention to one person's line of thought. And because we can be more critical, take a more critical perspective on the multiple different, and take multiple different lineages and decide what it is we want to take from each. So you're right. We are using our own wisdom and what is going to work for me and the people that I work with. Yeah,
I think for me it helps me get into my own kind of rhythm and my own way that I relate to the world. And so in a sense, probably what I teach is what's really important and good for me. And when I hear something and I do some course and someone shares a movement or a work in breath or something, I then take that in and I look at owning that for myself, how I can embody that. And then I'm going, I can now share this as an experience, partly deepening my own experience with it, but sharing that with other people. And I think that's one of the areas where that kind of joy and fascination and curiosity keeps coming, is that I'm not doing it because you told me, I'm doing it because you introduced me how I could learn something, embody it and feel it, and now I've got that freedom to communicate and express that. I think we were quite lucky.
Felt really, really useful for me. I've done a lot of somatic stress training and been doing some stuff training with Amber Gray, and a lot of it is like, oh my God, I just felt so resourced with that in my own body. And it's like, if I'm resourced, then how can I share it so other people can feel resourced? It's just, that for me is what's key. And then I often go back and I go, there's all this other stuff that I didn't realize I was even taught at the time because it didn't resonate with me at the time. But then as I go back later on, it might resonate with me more in a different, like maybe a year later, there might be things I pick up as I go over my notes. It's like, wow, I never actually picked up on that, because some of the practices just really resonated with my heart or my belly or whatever. Yeah.
I like it when someone shares something and I go, that's how I would say it. If I, that sounds like me saying it. And it's kind of, then you start to, it has a lovely resonance around that. Who's your inspiration at the moment?
I've got a few. I've got a few. I got a few. I mean, I'm doing some training with Amber Gray, who works with survivors of torture, victims of torture around the world, and her about a very, very body-based, polyvagal informed psychotherapy, dance movement therapy. So it's a dance movement therapy, which it sounds really wild, but actually isn't. It's actually very much like trauma sensitive yoga, and it's very based on micro movements.
Yeah.
And I have been spending a whole lot of time with dancers, which, as you know, is my sphere. So, so I've been doing it.
Who? What kind of dancers? What?
Well, just it's a whole bunch of dance movement therapists who are doing the training.
Nice.
And so that's my biggest fear, is spending time in a room with dance movement therapists or dance therapists or dancers, because it just feels like they're so embodied, and I'm still on my embodiment journey. And so that's been really interesting. But of course, that's on hold now. We're halfway through a 16-day course because, of COVID, she can't come over.
Yeah.
And I've been following along and doing some training with Maylai Swan of Yoga for Humankind in Australia, in Melbourne, and she hopefully is coming out in November. And I guess she's a very trauma-informed and yoga community, yoga-based person.
Yeah.
So different kind of bringing elements, and she also trains with Amber Gray. So there's this weaving of I guess ideas. And then I was going to do the Scott Lyons somatic stress release in Sweden in September, but that's off as well. And I guess it's another embodied flow type of training, and it really resonates with me because it's very practical, and I just think stress is something that we could all learn, have some support with, because we're just living in this crazy busy world, and the embodiment of stress management just takes it to a different level than just talking about it from a cognitive level. Yeah
it was always quite a crazy world anyway, but it feels really crazier in it. Well, it is crazier, isn't it? And you feel how kind of small the world is, really, or how so interrelated that we are.
Yeah, even though we're cut off from it.
I know, that's really interesting, isn't it? But
yeah.
And I think there's people that have been more connected. I've been connecting with people that I haven't connected with in my normal daily life. I've really enjoyed not having to get on a plane and fly somewhere to teach. That's been quite a treat as well.
Yeah. And I came up to Waipu in lockdown, and I just basically haven't left.
Fantastic.
I will have to. I did go to Christchurch for a meeting, and then I did for my other work, my suicide-related work, and then I did have to go to Auckland. I taught some face-to-face yoga and taught in a yoga teacher training. That was really lovely, being around people. But it was also I realised how exhausting it was.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's something about this whole thing of the RNA and picking up on people's energies. So when you're in a Zoom situation, you don't have that. And I think one of the things that is useful for a lot of people, particularly really sensitive people who pick up on other people's energies and vibrations. And
in a way, it can be protective. Because I guess I've been doing all my therapy on Zoom with people, and I noticed that yes, I've got Zoom exhaustion, but I don't have energy exhaustion. And so because I'm, often I'm sitting in a room with trauma.
Yeah.
And so in a way, there is this level of protection as well, which may not be a good thing. I'm not quite sure.
I think it's probably kind of swings and roundabouts. Isn't, but certainly being able to do it from your own home, like you said, has been useful for many people in lots of different ways as well. But having contact with people is so important. And don't forget, there's a lot of people who really need hugging or touching. And to be deprived of that as well. How are you in the world of trauma or mental trauma, or however you want to talk about it? Is that increased since the lockdown? And because there's been talk, and we did talk about it a while ago, that I said something about more suicides, and you said there's not more suicides.
No, there's not been more suicides. In fact, the rates have probably dropped.
So how come we're hearing that? And is that specific to New Zealand? Are there more because you're hearing things like homicides and shooting and stuff in America have gone up, and there's abuse in families, and that's on the increase because you can't get away from your family. But you're saying that, so is that specific to New Zealand, or you don't know?
I don't know. I mean, I can't talk to abuse rates or homicide rates, but I know that suicide rates have not risen.
Wow. Okay.
And often when there is a crisis, like during the Christchurch earthquakes, when there is a crisis, people pull together, people look after each other, people get the supports that they need and want.
Yeah, but we couldn't do that because we were in lockdown. It was different from the Christchurch bombing.
Yeah, but I think people still reached out and looked after each other via Zoom. I mean, how many stories have you heard of families that connected via Zoom when they didn't normally, particularly if they live overseas?
Yeah. No,
so there maybe have been less isolation. I mean, I don't know the reasons why. I can't talk to that.
No.
But I do know that the numbers, and I guess it's I don't know where the rumours or is it scaremongering? Is it journalism trying to create a story? Is it, people trying to create work? I don't know, but the numbers have definitely not risen, and we're just hoping that they don't.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's journalism making, hyping things up, creating a lot of fear, because there is. So I started doing. I was probably a bit like you. I saw it coming, so I had my Zoom classes set up. I think before even we went into lockdown, I kind of got sense of that happening, and I also was really aware that at the different stages during lockdown, it felt like there was an archetypal emotion around the world, or in New Zealand, that we're all going through a very similar thing. You know, the fear to start off with, the unknown. And then there was a kind of a bit of a comfort when you you're in the middle of it, because there was nowhere to go back. You couldn't, there's nowhere to go forward. And then as we started to come out of lockdown, it went, ooh, dear me, I've got to start. So there was lots of different emotions for people coming up, and different challenges in lots of different ways. But I've heard of people that didn't have contact with their dad for 3 years, and they had fantastic Zoom and they reconnected, and it's been a real mixture. But and I'm also really aware that I'm very comfortably off here, and I can't do anything about that. I'm just in this moment in time. We've had our fair share of being in poverty and not having two coins to rub against each other and that kind of stuff as well. And I do appreciate that there are a lot of people in the world who, because of their environment, has been really, really hard, and that's continuing, isn't it, throughout the world as well. I'll tell you one of my biggest struggles. So I want to save the world. I want to do something that fixes the world, and I can't let go of that properly. And I know that we all say that it all happens from within, all that kind of stuff too. But there's a desperateness somewhere of just saying, if I could just come up with an ingredient that we could all be happy again. I know we weren't all happy, but you know what I mean. It's a bit of a thing to carry around. Yeah. I think we all have it. Do we all have it to a little bit of a degree? I mean, we're all suddenly become amazing. I was just going to say, we've all become amazingly knowledgeable about science that we never have any. We're very opinionated.
About many different things.
All of us.
And I guess that really struck me during the onset of, like, before lockdown and then during lockdown, and it's kind of like the whole thing of people really quick to blame and judge each other. Like, first of all, there was the onset of this is just a flu. Oh my God, you're overreacting. Oh no, it's just a flu. Oh my God, no. And the people were kind of like the people who are kind of like believing it and taking it seriously were being judged and blamed by those who thought it was just a flu and were ignoring it, the deniers, I guess. And I guess I sense this, there's this, okay, we're turning on each other. How weird. And I guess for me, that's the bit that sits really uncomfortably and makes me want to kind of save the world. It's like, well, how do we as human beings, what is it about us that created that blame and judgment straight away? And then as we kind of went through the different lockdown periods, and it's like, oh, well, they're breaking the rules and they're not, and they're really compliant and they're not. And there's this kind of judginess around that as well. And then a judginess around how quick people were to return to the world. And I think we're all just so different. And what is it about us that we can't honour where each of us are at in our own particular journey, whether we are in denial about it or whether we're believing in it, we're taking it really seriously. I mean, my son came back from Canada just before lockdown, and I said to him, look, just, you know, it hadn't, because I was kind of reading about stuff, and I said, just don't go and visit your grandparents for 2 weeks, particularly those in a retirement village. Let's just hold tight on that. You know, I said, imagine if you were the one that, you know, killed a whole retirement village. And the people reacted to me, and like people thought I was really overreacting, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling really judged by you.
Yes.
But I believe in myself. I couldn't live with myself if I let my son, you know, or kind of didn't encourage him not to go. I couldn't not stop him. So yeah, feeling really, there's a lot of judgment out there. And is that part of what we're dealing with?
Yeah, and no, it is, obviously. It's something that that has been really highlighted. Fear, I mean, I think that's an underlying emotion around this as well. Certainly a lot of anger and frustration, or the inability to be able to express that becomes suppressed. So anger and grief was massive. Not being able to go out, not being able to assimilate things. Sympathy, that was definitely there, wasn't it? We're reaching out to people, but not so much joy. I've been looking in the mirror going, who's that grumpy face, you know? And I remember there was a experiment that people did, and the two groups of people were watching the same video. One group of people watched this video, and it wasn't very nice, and the other group watched it with a pen in their mouth. And that slightly simulates a smile, and their experience of the video was less horrible than the that didn't have that. So I've been going around trying to smile a bit more because it's more uplifting, because it feels there's still an intensity out there for all of us, I think. Confusion. Yeah, not so much joy.
It's interesting because, I mean, coming again from a very privileged position, we had a very privileged lockdown. I'm really aware of that. And my 3 grown-up children came to join us, and we just had so much joy. And it was like, we normally only spend 4 nights together a year between Christmas and New Year. And then all of a sudden we had 7 weeks, because my son had just come back from Canada as well. We had the most joyful, fantastic, content time. It was so lovely. It was just, and I think each of us in our family have really appreciated that every day.
Yeah, and you didn't want it to end, did you?
I didn't want it to end. And I've created this new, I guess for me, it was really important to have a pause and to just, and this is just me personally, you know, not judging anyone else for doing it differently. It's like, okay, this has really created a sense of space in my life, and it's made me reflect that how busy I was and how I was rushing. And I don't enjoy rushing or being stressed. I hate how it feels in my body. It gets really tense and contracts. And I was like, okay, I'm up here. I'm working really damn hard. I worked really hard during lockdown. I was one of those few people who didn't bake sourdough bread. And there was a spaciousness. Yes. Because there was a whole lot of other stuff that wasn't happening. And so I was like, okay, I want to keep that. I want to keep some of that. Intentionally, I did not rush back to pick up my life where it is. And I'm still sitting here trying to decide what parts I want to keep and what parts I want to let go, because, and I did some really amazing practices around that, around letting things go. And it was amazing. And I guess we have a choice, but I know I have a choice. I have a choice here. And I guess someone really reminded me about that. I said, when you were talking about choices before, and I said, I was thinking, I really don't want to go back. And I think it was one of my colleagues, she said, Sandra, you have a choice here. Yes. And I was like, I do too. I have a choice. I can choose what I do here. And that felt so powerful. And that's why we do this in our yoga as well. I have a choice. And how does that feel?
Yeah, I've been doing that in my yoga too. And it's certainly at different times it's felt more prevalent or important to focus on that. It's like getting someone to do a movement and say, well, you do it with your muscles, and now do it so that you engage it deeper or differently, or do it more with the cells or I said, see, you have choices. We all have choices. And then there was one occasion when I was feeling so this stuff was coming up and it was difficult, and I was sitting down giving myself a hard time, and I had a conversation with myself because I like talking to myself. I do lots of
It's a sign of old age too.
I always have done that for a long time, even when I was younger. And the conversation was, hey, Paul, what are you doing? Why are you beating yourself up? Why don't you have a connection and relationship with this stuff that's going on in your head with the same care and attention that you do with your yoga and the way you teach yoga? So I created some kindness around my engagement and kindness with my yoga. And for me, I suppose, I think probably the two words that I think have been really key is choices and kindness.
Kindness is huge. Yeah. And kindness to self.
Kindness, that's what I mean. Kindness with your yoga. You don't have to go, you can be, you can be, and sometimes is good, and being really physical and engaging and feeling that dynamics in your body is fantastic. But there's an element of choice we can have. We can be kind. We can be deeply engaging. We all have certain choices.
And I think that links, as yoga and psychology link together, it also links to our responses during COVID-19. It's like, can I be kind to myself in whatever response I've had?
Yes.
And I think a lot of where people are struggling now is actually, I'm feeling this. Am I allowed to feel it? And about validating that what you're feeling is really valid. Like, yes, I have lost my job, but I'm actually, I'm better off than a lot of people. Yeah, but actually you've lost your job, and there was grief around that, and there was sadness, and there's some anger, and there's all those things. So can you sit with those and validate them and be really kind? And I guess I've been doing mindful self-compassion training online during COVID, and it's like, what would you say to a friend? I guess it's how, if a friend of yours was feeling like you are, what would you say to them? And can you say that to yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like Donna Fahy says that when she's doing her yoga nidra, something about if your best friend came to see you and what advice would they give you, something along those lines, which was quite a powerful way of thinking about your own state and place where you are.
Because we're so good at looking after other people and being kind to others, and so not good at being kind to ourselves.
Yes, yeah. And it starts there. Absolutely. It is really challenging. It's bringing up lots of stuff for all of us. I think we're all going through so similar things, the grief, the anger, the frustration. I don't like this, I like this. Why are you like that? And it's kind of different intensities in different situations, obviously. And then I'm thinking about all this stuff going on in America and these people that are going on the streets. And I get it from sitting here in New Zealand. I get it. And I know what frustration is, and you want to go out. I've done my protesty stuff as well. But then I'm thinking, well, these people they go back home and they're probably still angry. And then they go out in the morning. You never get a break from this incessant, I want to change the world. I want to beat the world up. You've been nasty to me. And what I'm kind of getting at is we need to stop, don't we? We need to get off that express train and give ourselves a little bit of yoga nidra, a little bit of time out.
A little bit of rest.
A little bit of it, quite a lot of it in many ways.
And I guess, there's a really neat book called Trauma Stewardship. And it's about how do we care for ourselves when we are caring for others. And one of the premises, we can keep holding it and pushing against it and pushing against it. And if we don't get any rewards, then we're going to burn out. Yeah. So how do we hold that? Not lightly is not the right word, but more usefully for ourselves. And what can we do also as we're doing all this to keep looking after ourselves?
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I teach restorative yoga and yoga nidra and those slow, quiet practices. And it feels like people have really have wanted and asked for those kind of practices during the lockdown and post lockdown, because I think maybe people are realizing that there's a need for it.
Yeah.
And but also if you're in a really angry, activated state, then quiet practices are not the best things for you. So I guess there's something else that might sit in the middle for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my yoga's got lots of little yoga nidras in them, you know, where we kind of work towards that thing of just letting go and being present. How quickly can we let go? You know, it's definitely, for me, it feels like a learned skill that, you know, you keep learning. I don't think you ever stop learning those things.
Yeah.
So going back to, or two things, going back to people with mental health, we're not calling it mental health, sorry, what are we calling it?
Well-being. I'm just saying, people, I mean, we're all struggling. It's like, because I guess we're all struggling in some way. We're all facing uncertainty.
Yes.
I'd say we've all got some level of stress going on. So in a way, we're all in this together. So can we say, but how do we resource our well-being more?
Okay, yeah. So, but I think when you talk about working in that mental health field, it's people who are they struggling more? They have a deeper trauma, less embodied?
See, I don't work in the mental health field. I work in private practice with people who have a history of trauma.
Yes.
Which may lead to diagnoses of anxiety and depression and PTSD, but they are having a normal response to experiences that they've had.
Yes.
And so I guess for me, I don't see it as working I'm working with somebody who is having difficulty perhaps living a life that they want to live. So there's quite a different perspective on making someone, I guess the mental health, even the languages says you're flawed and I'm here to fix you.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm not into that. It's like, okay, we're both human.
Yeah.
We're both in this together. We're both climbing our own mountains, but maybe I have some skills that I've learned along the way that I can share with you. And I guess it's just trying to change that power dynamic that can be so set in that mental health field. So it kind of puts me off. Yeah.
Puts me off. Yeah, I don't like power situations, matriarchal, patriarchal, oligarchic, whatever they might be. It's for me, and I suppose that's one of the things that is challenging for me, is that it's become, I've lost my choices of, I kind of have to listen to someone saying something. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake in the world, rather than saying, let's all, or just not being told what to do all the time. Because because that's what we've been told to do in lockdown. You can't do this. So that's been a struggle, probably for a lot of people too. So, and I've also recognised that there's been a lot
taking your choices away.
Yeah. And my choices are very real for me.
Yeah.
And I also recognise they're not really real. They're my stories I've made up because I feel comfortable with them. And I've thought about different aspects of this, and if I sit in another camp, I'm really uncomfortable, but it's part of my history, it's part of my makeup. And what are we, 8-9 billion people in the world, and we all see the world differently. No one sees the world in the same way.
Right.
And
so what I've been doing is when people feel like they've had the control taken away, it's like finding the tiny parts of the day where you do have control.
Yeah.
Because there is, I guess, where does our attention get drawn? It gets drawn into the same place every day. I have no control. Yeah. I've had my power taken away. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what about you take your attention elsewhere? What do you have control in having when you have a cup of tea? Do you have control over when you have lunch? Yeah. Do you have a control about whether you watch the media or get sucked into social media or come to the 1 o'clock briefings that we used to do? There are so many choices that you do have. And I think, can we recognize and balance that? Yes, we've had a whole lot of choices taken away, but we have a whole lot of choices that are left. So I guess it's just reminding people about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you got something you want to share with us? A little 5-minute
Yeah.
meditation?
And I guess this is something that was shared with me when I was in a really stressful, overwhelmed work time, and also kind of came back through different practices during COVID. And it is just simply a way of resourcing ourselves, because I think here we are in this place of uncertainty, looking at different ways that we can resource ourselves.
Cool. So I'm going to you're going to take me through it, and then people look into this, they'll be able to, awesome.
So we're just going to look at 3 different ways that we can resource ourselves, kind of using the body.
Yeah.
So feeling free to find a comfortable seat. You can change the way that you're sitting if it's to find, I guess, just seeking as much comfort as you can right now. So just noticing what it is that moves you towards comfort, if that's useful to you, whether it's changing the way that you're sitting on your chair or putting something warmer on. And then feeling free just to look around the room that you're in, like orienting yourself to this particular time and place and space. Allowing your neck and your eyes to wander around and to settle on a few things as you wander your eyes around. And then seeing if there is something really pleasurable or brings you joy that you would like to settle your eyes on. Maybe something in the room or a view outside of the room. And as you're really just letting your gaze settle there, and just noticing how it is or what it is that it actually brings into your body as you sit with this object or view that brings you pleasure or joy. How does it land in your body? And we can do this every time we enter a space. We can orient ourselves to it and find a place that might nourish us, find something to look at that might nourish us. And for some of us, that works well, but for others of us, we may want to look internally. So for this, you can have your eyes open or closed for this part. And perhaps remembering a time when you did feel nourished, able to meet the challenges around you, maybe secure. And this may be a place that you've been or a place in your imagination. It may be a memory of when you were with people who helped you feel like this, or even what it's like when you pat your pet. And again, just encouraging this feeling to go from the thinking mind into the body. How does it feel if you're feeling nourished, comfortable, at ease? Where does that land? And if your eyes are closed, feeling free to flutter them open gently. Or you could keep them closed. And the last piece is just this aspect of grounding. So we're just trying 3 different ways to resource ourselves at a time when we need it. So eyes open or closed, perhaps just noticing all the places in your body that are connecting with the floor, the earth, a chair. Perhaps as you breathe out, just giving a little bit more weight and heaviness into those parts. So breathing in, there might be some lightness in the parts that aren't connecting with the support. And breathing out, perhaps just giving a little bit of weight to the supports that are there underneath you. And you may even like to imagine that these supports that are there have got little fingers or tentacles that reach up and actually support you. And how does that feel in your body? Where do you feel it? You might like to just let all that fade into the background. Perhaps just take a moment to reflect on, in this particular moment, whether it's which of those was most useful for you, to resource you, to face this uncertain time. It might be the external resourcing, finding something in the room or the space around you to resource yourself. It could be finding a memory or an event or people or something in your imagination that's internal. Or it could be just a sense of grounding and being supported as your body sits or lies in whichever shape you've chosen to be in. And you might find that a different skill might be useful at different times. So it's good to have all three in our little kit of coping strategies. If you feel ready, you might like to just flutter your eyes open and bring yourself back to the room. Just maybe noticing how you feel now as compared to when you started. It can be useful to take a baseline at the beginning, and you can feel the impact of each practice on you individually. And I always kind of encourage people as they come out of something like that, not to feel the need to talk or to make eye contact, because just to give a little bit of space.
It's got it's got parallels with the inner resource, hasn't it? Rather than having an actual old experience or when you're a child or something. So, and it's great to have different tools in our box to use absolutely at different times. So it's lovely.
Because for some people really struggle with an internal resource or an inner resource.
Yes.
And so it's good to have other.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's so cool when to connect with you and to share what you're doing, because it has lots of parallels, and we know that with the stuff that I'm doing. We come from with slightly different flavors to it, but ultimately it's that same thing about how can I be more present in the world with less tensions, and how can I share my knowledge and experience so other people can go away and have the tools to be more comfortable in their everyday life, basically.
Yeah.
And
how do I live the life I want to live and the way I want to live it? That's all it's about.
Yeah. And so there's places for people to go up, but you've got some websites, haven't you? Body Mind Psychology.
Body Mind Psychology has a list of all our ACC and self-funded trauma sensitive and iRest classes.
Yeah.
My website is Integrative Therapy, and that has a list of, like, I'm starting a Zoom class next Thursday, like a restorative and yoga nidra class online to make it more accessible to people. And like the Mental Health Foundation has some brilliant resources around. They're always putting out there's some great things on social media. Just really validating it's actually okay to feel uncertain right now. So there's a whole lot of really useful things on their website that people might find useful as well.
Yeah, I'll put that up as well at the when we put that up on when this video.
Yeah, that'll be yeah.
So people have that. Anything you like to say before we close? Or we?
Oh, thank you, Paul. It's been lovely coming on and seeing what you do and being in your virtual space. It's been an honour, so thank you.
It's been really lovely reconnecting with you again. I really enjoy it. So thank you so much. I will end the recording of the video, and let's stay online just for a little bit. And but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.